Hello there, everybody, and welcome to this new edition of Harris's Heroes, where we talk to people who are doing amazing things for other people and changing the world one person, one soul, one heart at a time. And this week, we are joined by someone who is an amazing example of what Harris's Heroes are all about. Because when you hear his story, you're going to see how he actually could have been nominated as a hero for practically every part of his story. We're talking about a man who is the son of West African immigrants growing up in Brooklyn, going on to get a medical degree, becoming a decorated Navy veteran, who also founded a network that is saving organs and saving lives all around the country, and using his experience and his passions that he's developed along the way, and using all of that to impact lives in a multitude of ways. You're talking about Dr. Hassan Tetteh, who is joining us now. Dr. Tetteh, great to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Leon. Yeah, very kind introduction. I appreciate it.
No, I had to keep it short because there's so much we can share talking about you. You're a great example of why I love doing this series, because almost every day I meet someone just in the course of life who is doing something really, really amazing that the world needs to know about, because it's doing something really good that needs to be supported, changing lives for other people. And this is what happened. Our mutual friend Constantine, his truck broke down in my driveway, and he and I were just sitting out talking, and he told me about this celebration of a retirement from the Navy that he had just gone to. And he tells me about this amazing story about this doctor and this star network that saves organs and does this sort of like a special ops operation style. And I said, that sounds amazing. And he goes, yeah, and he lives right over there. I thought, oh my goodness, we are within arm's reach of each other. And that's what I love about living here and about life and learning about people like you. So let's start from the very beginning. You grew up in Brooklyn, right?
I sure did, and maybe give you a bit more of an accurate description of me for your audiences so that they understand. I like to just say, just use three things to describe me. I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm a surgeon. And maybe in that order is probably the priority that I should probably ascribe myself to. I like
Well,
to.
that's where you ended up, but you started somewhere else.
Yes, I did start somewhere else. So I did start in a little town in New York called Brooklyn. As you mentioned, I did have West African immigrant parents. I said did because both my parents have passed away now. My dad passed
Okay.
away many years ago after I graduated medical school. And my mom, she regrettably passed just after I retired from the Navy after 25 years of service. I spent 25 years in the Navy, joined after medical school. It was and has been one of my great rewarding things that I've done in life, to serve and to preserve our freedoms and democracy, and then the ideals that make the United States the place that my parents wanted to come and plant their flag and realize opportunities not only for themselves but for the children as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it started there in Brooklyn. I always like to start in Brooklyn because my Brooklyn was a different kind of Brooklyn than the Brooklyn of the present day. But growing up in Brooklyn, you had to have a lot of grit. You had to have a lot of survival skills. You have to have a lot of wit. And you just always had to be aware of your environment. And I think those skills learned in Brooklyn as a child growing up and adolescent served me well throughout the rest of my career. It certainly helped me through medical school and the rigors of academics. Certainly helped me when I was in the desert of Afghanistan and on the ship and deployed all over the place in this great wide world of ours, and helped me in life and just relating to people, understanding that people have different backgrounds and vantage points, and just understanding how to sort of deal with that, the human condition.
Yeah. 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 Well, that had to involve a lot of challenges. Okay. I wouldn't guess that there was a straight line between your parents' home and medical school.
Not a
How did
straight
that
line.
connection happen?
Yeah, not a straight line at all. I think many immigrant parents, and certainly those that come to America, always are looking for making their lives better and improving the lives of their family. So I don't think my parents deviated from that at all.
Hmm.
And like many immigrant parents that I know, they want their children to be a doctor or a lawyer. That was sort of the two options that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, Leon, I had ideas for other things I'd like to do, and I wanted to be an artist. I got into a very prestigious art high school. Yes, I was a graffiti artist and became a little bit more of a fine artist on
Kid.
the way. I still dabble in the arts. I still do poetry. I still draw. I still paint occasionally. So my parent, though, my dad in particular, said, "Nope, you're not going to art school because artists don't make any money. So you better go to a science and engineering high school," which is where I went. I went to Brooklyn Technical High School. Excellent education, really formative in terms of giving me the foundation of the sciences and being surrounded by other people that were also aspiring physicians. Many of my colleagues from high school are now physicians or in the healthcare space.
Is
I
that
was,
right?
yeah, I was a biochem major in college. And like I said, when I got to medical school, I joined the Navy thinking I would just do a few years. And that turned out to be a lot longer than I had anticipated.
No, 25 years.
25 years. So 25 years later, I'm a heart and lung transplant surgeon. You alluded to that in the
Mhm.
introduction. That was my specialty in which I trained in the discipline that I, still work in clinically. And I was drawn to that because I had the great fortune of having some experience as a general surgeon and then going to the University of Minnesota, which is where I trained
Uh-huh.
my heart and lung fellowship. And the University of Minnesota has an incredible history that's rich in not only cardiac surgery, but also transplant medicine and transplant surgery.
Uh-huh.
And there, many people leave that institution saying they love transplant or they never want to see it again in their life.
And let me guess, you were in the former, not the
In the
latter.
I was in the former camp, yes, sir. And I had an opportunity to spend some time in Boston prior to being assigned to the Naval Hospital at the time in the early
Uh,
2000s. And I've been here ever since, essentially, as I mentioned, with lots of deployments and lots of special missions all over the world, but, grounded really here in the DC, Maryland area.
well, if I can cut you off, I have to
Sure.
ask you, what was it about transplants that turned you on, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think we can maybe talk a little bit about innate and natural curiosity of mine that may have part of it, but it's
Uh-huh.
also a bit of influence from my dad, quite frankly. My
How's
dad,
that?
yeah, my dad had always, he was an entrepreneur at heart and in spirit, and he always would inculcate to me and tell me and really drill down that when you're looking at whatever it is that you're doing in life, make sure you are aware of what's happening in the world around you.
Hmm.
Training in cardiac surgery, I saw all of these new technologies coming on the scene. So,
Hmm.
for example, our cardiology colleagues were using, instead of cracking the chest open and ripping veins out of the legs and doing a very complicated and involved surgery, they were simply going in with a catheter through the artery and ballooning up and taking, the blockages and making them better through stents. And I said, well, maybe we may not have a role for doing that kind of surgery in the future. So
Uh-huh.
it was that planting of the seed of having a natural curiosity around the world, about the world around you and how things were
Uh-huh.
changing and being adept at adapting to those changes so that you make yourself relevant in the future that really
Hmm.
has been something that I've carried. And in my mind, as I looked at all of the different aspects of cardiac surgery, I thought to myself, well, it's very unlikely they're going to do some sort of through the vessel removal and putting back of an organ. And so I was like, well, I think we'll definitely have something to do in the future if you're a transplant surgeon, because I don't think anybody else other than our specialty can really do that.
A matter of self-preservation, then.
Matter of self-preservation. But another aspect of that, Leon, is that what I recognize and what I appreciate about transplant is that there's this very, very thin line between life and death. On the one hand,
Yes.
when you have the recovery procedure, that person that's a donor, has suffered a very tragic event. And in that process of that grief with the family and the questions that most certainly come along with a sudden type of death or an unexpected kind of death, you have this renewal on the other side where
Yes.
someone can now get a gift, a very generous gift from a family member, and have a legacy sort of endure and preserve and continue on in another patient. And being in that balance of life and death and understanding how fragile life is, not only always gave me an appreciation every day for each
Hmm.
day I had on earth, which I'm sure you can appreciate,
Oh, yeah.
but the incredible gratitude for life and how you should not waste a moment of it. And that
Yeah.
reinforcement through every case, along with the recognition and the knowledge and the real satisfaction of knowing you were saving a life every time you
Yeah.
did a case on the other end, is
No.
incredibly rewarding.
Yeah,
So for
and
all of
it's a gift that lifts more than just one family. The family
absolutely.
of the person who's lost, they feel some sort of, I don't know, lift themselves when they realize that they are going to be helping others. And one person's loss can actually, as you know, help many others when you're talking about a number of different organs going into different places.
Correct. To be a life changer. So those were all of the things that really, attracted me to transplant. It was very rewarding. It still is very rewarding. And I always felt like I was doing something to sort of be in the middle of this very delicate balance of life and death, and still do. And for those reasons, I really truly enjoy it and passion for it. So you're right. I was fortunate to have an opportunity with some colleagues of mine to pioneer different practices in this field to really expand the opportunities for transplantation for a number of individuals. And I'm continuing to do that work with some colleagues in the new organization that I work in right now called.
Well, tell us. We'll talk about. Tell me about the that organization after you tell us about Star. Now, I understand that you've now moved on from that particular company, but
Right.
that was, if I can say, pardon my French, that was a hell of an idea to come up with a way to take your experience and your way of doing things from the military with a special
Correct.
ops sort of approach. Tell us about that and how that germ of an idea took root with you and what you did with
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, it kind of goes back to, some of the lessons and I think some of the values that I got not only from my dad and my many mentors, but always trying to be a problem solver. I
it.
think really something that is a good skill set to have no matter what your discipline is, right?
Oh yeah.
The world is full of problems, and if you can find a problem and you can find a solution and build a solution for a problem and you like what you're doing and someone pays you for it, that's like the holy grail.
It's as good as it gets.
You've solved the problem, you've appreciated and developed a value proposition for your community and hopefully society, and oh, by the way, someone will compensate you for that.
There you go.
Yeah, so really at the fundamental level, being in transplant, I recognize that we have long waiting lists and we have patients that die, unfortunately, on waiting lists. And there's always the certain appreciation that there's a shortage. I put that in air quotes of organs. And that is true to some extent, but I also recognize after doing all these years, this work, that what we really had was a logistic problem and a sort of allocation problem in terms of like getting organs that were available to the people that needed them in a timely and efficient manner.
Hmm.
Sometimes we didn't have the expertise or the personnel around sometimes to recover organs. And unfortunately, the consequences, those organs were lost to someone that otherwise would have benefited. So recognizing that and thinking about that problem, right? And all of the many people that are on waiting lists that are passing away on waiting lists, and then having my experience, which was rich in the military of logistics and doing operations and supportive operations where medical assets and a mission was really paramount, and thinking about how we can bring that kind of behavior, that kind of like dedicated mission oriented focus into a specialized team that could be available and on demand to help not one center but many centers
Hmm.
recover organs that were available for their transplant patients that were waiting, became sort of this natural evolution that happened over a number of years. And it happened here in the DMV because that's where I was at. And I think it was fortunate and also fortuitous that I happen to be in an area where we have a number of transplant centers all co-located, if you will,
Uh-huh.
together. We have University of Maryland, we have Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and in Northern Virginia, we have Inova, and in Washington, D.C., we have MedStar, all of which do heart transplants, and some of those centers also do lung transplants. And I was fortunate to be able to have relationships and develop relationships with all of them, and at some point was credentialed and working at all those hospitals, helping support their transplant programs. And it was really, Leon, what you're doing here that I think led to the development of our practice, our STAR team, if you will,
How's that?
developing trust and relationships with people,
Uh-huh.
getting to know their organizations and their teams and them getting to know me. And over a period of years working with each other, coming up with an understanding of shared missions and values and really wanting to help them improve and expand their practices and also help save the lives of the patients that were on their waiting list. And so over time, I started to recover the organs for all of these centers and realized that there needed to be more capacity. So I recruited some like-minded surgeons to join me in the effort. And in
Mhm.
heart lung transplant surgery, our time is a lot more limited in terms of like how much time you have when the organ
Oh.
gets removed and when it can be placed in.
Mhm.
And abdominal transplant colleagues have been doing something similar for years. But what we did was really have a focused, very dedicated, laser sharp mission of recovering organs, hearts and lungs for the centers that needed them. And over time, we grew and expanded that, and we were helping organizations and transplant centers all across the Eastern Seaboard and in the Midwest, and had a desire to expand the practice nationally and really build an infrastructure that would very much minimize the unfortunate circumstances where you don't have expertise and personnel to recover a heart or a lung when one
Uh-huh.
is available so that it can deliver it to someone that needs it. And so I'm continuing that work, as I said, in a new role with a new organization. But I have never been more excited about our opportunities because we have great technologies now that can, expand that opportunity for people with machine perfusion devices that can expand and have the organs live outside the body a little bit longer, giving us even more time. I'm very bullish on artificial intelligence and AI with our
I was
ability.
going to ask you where that fit in.
Yeah, I'm very bullish on those things. And that's because I have, as I mentioned very early on, have always been a very curious, lifelong student. I
Hmm.
am, even just recently, just finished yet another program in study, learning about venture capital and private equity at Columbia Business School. So I've had numerous degrees. I'm always going to school. I get a lot of comments from my wife, and they've been very understanding and patient with my educational pursuit. But
Well,
I've just been naturally curious and innately sure that when you learn and you continue to have this mindset of always
uh,
looking to find problems and then more importantly find the solutions to those problems,
yeah.
you'll never be disinterested. You'll never have a boring day in your life.
All right. Well, let me ask you about that because one of the things I always tell young people is, one of the most important things you can do, two of the most important things you can do are pick the right friends because
Oh,
that really will guide almost every other decision you make and following your curiosity. People always use that phrase about following your bliss. You may not know what your bliss is in
yeah.
life, but you do know what it is you're curious about. You've found how I guess you tapped into that many times in your life, and obviously it's paid off for you. For those who are looking on right now and looking at your example and trying to find some ways that where they can sort of like I don't know tap into that in their own lives, what kind of advice would you give someone who's looking to try to find whatever it is that is going to be the thing that will open doors for them later on down the road in life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leon. I think I go back to, the answer that I provided before. Look around the world and be very observant, right? But be very curious and look for problems. And not that there's a shortage of them, right? There are lots of problems. I think a lot of
Hmm.
people are very good at admiring problems and saying, "Oh yeah, this is a problem," and complain about it and analyze it and do the data about it. And well, that's great. Anybody can admire a problem, but it really is more important, in my opinion, to try and address the problem and solve a problem.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, if you can do that, especially if you find something you're passionate about, and all of us have had, challenges and troubles in our lives, and they're usually the result of something that's not right in society or in the world. Well, you can
Hmm.
fix that, especially if you have the wherewithal to learn a skill, recruit some like-minded people on your cause,
Uh-huh.
and develop a solution for it. You'll have nothing to, you'll have nothing to be bored about. The real, I think, advice that I would give is something that I read, which was very simple, but it was so eloquent. It was like find a hole and fill it,
I like that.
right?
I like that.
Find a hole and fill it. And again, we live in a world right now where there is access to a myriad of things, tools and information and resources that, you and I, when we grew up, and certainly my parents grew up at a time when they didn't have access to information
That's right.
and resources that, many people now take for granted, quite frankly. And that's a
Hmm.
thing. But again, knowledge and information is only potential. It doesn't really guarantee anything. So
Hmm.
again, you remain enormously curious, and I think, that just means having a mind that's inquisitive and asking questions, especially when you're young, because, you may not have a lot of answers, and before you get old
Yeah.
and stuck in your ways. But just be curious. Just be very curious about the world around you. Find a hole and fill it.
That's a
Find a
great way
hole.
to look at it.
Find a
I
hole.
love that.
I mean, that's the best advice I could give to young people, because following your bliss and, like you said, your purpose and all these things. I think all of those evolve, and they come, and they come with life, and they come with experiences. And one's purpose
Mm.
evolves over time. One's bliss is not necessarily always found pursuing something. Sometimes it just emerges and it just happens. But yeah, find a hole and fill it. Be curious and dedicate yourself to lifelong learning. And I think there's no better time in the history of
Yeah.
humanity than now to really be curious, because you can find answers everywhere. Uh,
There's no excuse not to.
there's no excuse not to. Absolutely. And no matter what your discipline is either, I, I, I get comments. In fact, we were just my colleagues and I are on an email string, other surgical educators, and we were all on a string. And one of our colleagues had asked, I get a lot of questions from surgical trainees or people in medical school that are pursuing their medical degrees, and they're thinking about what specialty they're going to go into.
Yeah.
And they asked me, should I get an advanced degree? Meaning another degree beyond medicine. And we had a very rich conversation about it. And it's interesting, right? Because many people might be like, well, you're a doctor. You don't need to learn anything else. Well, no, that's Leon. I can't tell you how incorrect that is. That thinking is
Huh.
absolutely flawed. If you're a teacher, you should be learning a lot. If you're, someone working in any field, you should always be learning about your
Yeah.
craft and about your field. And in healthcare, because it's so complicated, learning about medicine is great. You should be
Hmm.
really focused and disciplined about something, but I think you should also be curious and learn other things.
That's one of the things I tell young people all the time. People like you are a great example of how important it is to always understand that you should never stop trying to find out what else you're good at.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The world changes and more holes are opening up that need to be filled all around you.
More world. Yeah. I came across this will be worth sort of highlighting as well, in addition to filling a hole.
Uh-huh.
Go maybe one step further, because you said the world changes, and the question that many ask is, well, how do I be prepared for the future? Or how can I be prepared for the future? And there's another resource I like to share with individuals, especially when that question comes up, and I try and bring those principles into discussions and lectures and conversations I have, which is, there's something I came across which was called Five Minds for the Future years ago, and I'll
Hmm.
just share them with you very.
Five minds for the future.
Five Minds for the Future. It was this sort of a mindset that one should have to be prepared for the future. And it was written by, the book is actually called Five Minds for the Future, and it was written by a person named Howard Gardner, who
Hmm.
had to be a professor at Howard at Harvard. And he's been well known for a lot of his educational paradigms. But the Five Minds for the Future stuck me. So you can imagine, I'm a very curious person. So one of the things I do is read a lot of books. I love books. And I've written a lot of books, and to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. But
Uh-huh.
this book stuck out with me because the title was just immediately captivating. Five Minds for the Future, because everyone wants to be relevant in the future, wants to be impactful in the future. So
Uh-huh.
the five minds are: number one, have a disciplined mind.
Hmm.
What that means is you should be good at a craft. Try and become an expert at something. Put in your 10,000 hours of whatever.
10,000 hours. That's what it
You
takes.
want to be a journalist, if you want to be a music producer, if you want to be an
Hmm.
artist, be really good at something, ideally something you're really interested in, something that brings you joy and you're passionate about, and of course, something that someone will compensate you for, and that's great. So be disciplined, be really good at something. That's number one.
Uh-huh.
Remain curious and keep learning. Number two is have a creative mind. And a creative mind means, yeah, be an artist, be someone that's doing things, but creativity is the way that he defines it is be a problem solver, connect
Uh-huh.
dots.
Uh-huh.
And that struck me, because I was like, yes, it takes creativity to solve problems. When we were thinking about how we were going to get energy, we had to start thinking about, well, maybe we can use this black stuff in the ground and turn it into something that'll produce energy for us, or the light bulb, or all these things. Creativity really comes from solving a problem. So it goes back to filling that
And
hole.
bringing something into existence.
That's right. Fill a hole, fill a hole. The third thing was synthesizing, have a synthesizing mind. And this book, of course, was written many, many years ago, well before, ChatGPT and all of these, tools we have that give us so much information that sometimes it's information overload. And what he was espousing in this paradigm of a synthesizing mind is you need to be able to take a lot of information, process it, synthesize it, so that you can take information and turn it into knowledge, and more importantly, wisdom that can help do the work that you're doing in your discipline and how you're being creative and solving problems. So synthesis was really important, because having a lot of information without synthesizing it is absolutely useless. And then the last two are really important, especially now. And this is why I think these 5 things were so powerful for being prepared for the future. The fourth one was being respectful, Leon. Respectful.
Okay.
Because he recognized that our world is so interconnected now in a way that wasn't, certainly hundreds of years ago, and certainly not even decades ago. We are all having to work, live, interact with, and play with, and be around people that have differences.
Yeah.
They have different beliefs. They have different backgrounds. And you have to be able to be respectful of those things. And what I've found is, if you are respectful, just fundamentally at your core, for everyone around you, you open yourself up to learning incredible things, because you can have a conversation with anyone.
Yes.
No matter what their background is, no matter what the work they're in or work they're not in, and realize, wow, I just learned something from that individual.
You've removed any barrier or any kind of exchange between the two.
Absolutely, especially if you approach it from a fundamental place of respect. I'm going to respect this person, even though they may have a different background. They may come from a different state or a different country, a different place in my world. They may have a different political view, but I'm going to respect them first and foremost. Because now I'm open to listening to what they're going to say. And guess what? I'm going to probably learn something. And hopefully, if they're giving me respect in return, I can help inform them about something. So that respectful part was really important. And then the last part, and this was so key, Leon, was an ethical mind. So let me go back. So have a disciplined mind, be really good at something, have a creative mind, fill a hole, solve a problem.
There you go. I love that.
Have a synthesizing mind where you can take a lot of information, turn it into knowledge, translate it into wisdom, and then do something useful with it. Be respectful. And then that last one was ethical. And you might say, well, ethical. Well, I'm ethical. But what does that mean? There's so many ways to define ethics. You do the right thing, of course, right? To quote Spike Lee. But the way that he described it, which was really interesting, was that ethics is really the responsibility we have to pass along information and our craft to the next generation. Right? Because if you think about it, if you really think about it, if you are a successful person in this world, no matter what your discipline or domain, whether you're in finance, you're in real estate, you're in engineering, you're in computer science, you're in the sciences, you're in the arts, somebody gave you information, somebody taught you something, somebody gave you advice, somebody took you under their wing, somebody mentored you. You
didn't get there alone. You never get there alone by yourself or in your own efforts.
It's like one of my professors used to say, if you see a turtle that's on top of a fence, somebody put him there. Somebody
filled a hole.
Somebody filled a hole. Somebody helped that turtle get up there. We're all turtles. So no matter where you are, if you high, the higher you are, the more people helped you get there. Now, you may not acknowledge that. That's okay. But you just have to know, looking out in the world, wherever you see a very successful person, there have been a lot of people that helped that person get there and still are helping them to stay there. So the ethical part, which I thought was such a really good way of just kind of bringing everything together, was that you have a duty. And you're not going to get paid for it, by the way. Help others. You
get paid for it some way or another. It may not be it may not show up in your bank account or your or your Zelle account, but
it may not come. It may not come in a Venmo, or maybe not come in a in a Zelle. But you have a duty and a responsibility to pass your information, your craft, on to the next generation as a way of really in many ways ensuring your legacy. And so for that reason, it just always served me well to sort of think about things in that five, sort of five mind for the future of a, whatever I'm doing, I try and think, all right, am I following these principles that, they're always sort of in the background. But I think for those in the audience, and especially as you highlighted for young people, thinking about that, being
Yeah,
curious, fill a hole, and then have those five minds or those five perspectives, be
yeah,
disciplined, be creative, synthesize that information, respect people, first and foremost,
yeah,
and then be
yeah.
ethical about it. Help others, because when you do that, it's going to come back to help you in some way.
Well, you sure helped out a lot of people by sharing today. I didn't expect this to turn into a TED talk, but that's exactly what we got. And I think everybody watching and listening here understands what I meant at the very outset when I said that you could have been nominated as a hero on pretty much every single facet of your life. And I want to thank you for staying true to your own ethics and passing this on, the examples and the lessons that you've learned along the way, because you really are helping a lot of people, both in your work and in what you're sharing with the rest of us and with the rest of the world. So thank you so much.
Well, you're
Doc-
very kind, Leon. You're doing the same by just having this platform. Podcasts have become very popular in a way of
yes.
disseminating information, right? So people could be, very good at synthesizing information and hopefully applying it to areas in their life where they need help. So, your platform and certainly the honor to be
You
invited
know,
to visit with you is truly something I appreciate. So thank
well,
you.
I can't wait to get a chance to do it with you in person.
All
Thank you
right.
so thank you so much for giving us your time and your mind today. I got notes I took here with about filling holes, turtles on poles, and five minds. All right. Can't wait to get to it. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan Tetteh. All the best to you. We'll see you down the
Thank you, Leon. Thank you very much.